Not every church that's growing is growing in a healthy way. There are 5 ways that churches grow that are extraordinarily spiritually dysfunctional. The first is the cult of personality. You have this amazing, engaging person. People start flooding in because this person is so dynamic, they're so engaging, their teaching is just phenomenal. And as soon as that leader leaves, the people leave. As soon as the personality is gone or the leadership style is gone, transition happens, people leave. It was based upon that person rather upon something deeper. And it was not based on the relationships with other people. It was not maybe even based on sound biblical teaching. It was just based on this incredibly engaging personality. You listen to their teaching, you're like, ooh, it's entertaining, but man, this is severely lacking from a biblical perspective. But they're drawing these huge crowds. No jealousy on my part. I don't want a big church. I want lots of small churches. So that doesn't really bother me. It's not a personal thing, but it's just an observation. The other personality aspect that can come into play is the narcissistic pastor or preacher or minister. I'm going to put a link to a video on the end of this so that you can watch how to spot that. But that's a huge problem. When you have someone who is so self-centered, it's all about them, and they develop a cult of personality around their personality to ensure their success, to ensure their longevity, to ensure they don't get questioned, to ensure that they don't have accountability. That's a huge problem. And there's churches who grow who have people like that in positions of leadership who maybe are just seemingly great leaders because they have this drive, but the source of their drive is to grow their own ego rather than to grow the kingdom. That's very deadly and dangerous. The second unhealthy way that churches grow is when the church across town who's similar to your church messes up. They make a change in the way that they're doing things. They change their teaching on something. And all of a sudden, these disgruntled people go, I can't put up with that, I'm gone. Now, to be clear, there are reasons and issues and doctrines over which it would be fine and healthy actually to leave a church. But in doing so, I think that Matthew 18 is incredibly important that we make an attempt to reconcile these things, to go to a person, have a conversation, bring back 2 or 3, have a conversation, etc. Now, that is typically looked at as a one-on-one. A person sins against a person. But if you believe that your leadership has sinned or is going a wrong direction, I think that those teachings would still apply, that we need to approach them directly rather than just say, I'm upset, I'm offended, I'm jumping ship, I'm going somewhere else. Because here's what happens. When you receive those people and your church starts growing, it's very exciting. You're like, wow, we got some amazing leaders, we got some amazing people, these sound biblical people, but they totally ignored what Jesus said about reconciliation. Not that you even necessarily can reconcile it, but there should be an attempt. So what happens now is you've received 50, 60, 100 people or more who are not willing to reconcile things with their past church, and now they're in your church. What's going to happen the first time something goes wrong? So really what you're doing is you're gathering the disobedient rather than really necessarily the faithful. And that can be a real problem down the road for your church when your church makes a decision and these people have no idea how to reconcile things. So how do you address that? When people come from other churches, you need to talk to them and just at some point have a conversation. Okay, where you come from? Were you in another church? Oh, well, what happened? If they say, oh, well, they did X, Y, and Z. Well, did you have an opportunity to talk to leadership about, oh, no, well, I'd really encourage you to go back and have those conversations. How long you were there? 20 years. You know those people, you love those people. Go back and have those conversations and see that the big fear is fleshly. It's like, oh, we're going to lose those people. No, we want those people. We want to grow. We want to have better metrics, more, rear ends in the seat, etc. But we have to resist the flesh on that. Resist the flesh to embrace the ways of Jesus and be faithful to the ways of Jesus. That's really, if you want to grow a church, how you need to grow a church is to be faithful to what Jesus said to do. So encourage reconciliation rather than just glom onto new people because your numbers are expanding and your budget's back on track, etc. Again, very tempting, I understand it, but it's not the way that Jesus designed it. Again, there are reasons to leave a church. There are healthy reasons to leave a church. There are some things churches can do or teach that you need to leave a church, but there should be some attempt at reconciliation before you leave. The third thing is churches sometimes become so seeker-friendly and outsider-focused that they lose their focus. And you say, well, isn't the church here to be on mission? It is, but that's actually secondary to the church taking care of its own people. In Galatians, Paul said, to do good to all, the whole world, but first and foremost to the household of faith. Read 1 Corinthians 14. The whole thing talks about that the church exists for the edification, the building up of believers. That there are times when unbelievers come into their midst. That's what speaking in tongues and interpreting of tongues and prophecies can actually assist in convicting those people of their sin and for them to come to repentance. It's all in there in 1 Corinthians 14, but the thrust of 1 Corinthians 14 is that the assembly really is for the building up of believers. The same in 1 Corinthians 12, for the building up of the body. That's what the gifts exist for. That's what the people are together connected to do. So the church does not actually exist for non-believers, the assembly, the gathering, is for the building up, the encouragement, the instruction, the communion, the praying of, and the teaching of the believers, the saints, the disciples, not for unbelievers. And so when churches flip that script and they go, we're going to create an assembly of believers that's actually not for the believers, it's actually for the unbelievers, it actually misses a lot of the thrust of the New Testament teaching on the purpose of the assembly itself. It's not for unbelievers, it's for the believers. We go out on mission, we proclaim the word of Christ to non-believers out in the world. We do invite them to our assemblies. We pray that they would be convicted in our assemblies, but our assemblies cannot be so focused on outsiders that they fail to help and build up those who are on the inside. The fourth are churches that are set on business solutions over spiritual solutions. These are churches that typically don't pray about decisions. They typically don't fast about decisions. They're all about sitting around a boardroom making business-minded decisions in a business-minded way without consulting outside guidance, without asking the church to pray over something. It's just defaulting to what the leaders in the church know. It's defaulting to their experience. It's a very, very common thing. And you can grow a church through business practices, but you can't really grow the kingdom as well through business practices, and there's a difference. You can get more people in the room through embodying, embracing practices that are business-minded, but you may not actually be growing the kingdom. You may not actually be getting people into deeper spiritual depth or deeper relationship with Christ. And the last, number 5, is building a church based on what you're against rather than what you're for. You hear the sermon week after week about how all the other people are wrong and how you're the only ones who are right. You hear the sermons about how you're the church that has this issue right or that issue right. There are ministry practices that come as a reaction to what people experience somewhere else. And you say, we will never do it that way here. That's not the way we do it here, because you have such a bad taste in your mouth. Now, here's the thing. If you've been hurt by church, one of the worst things you can do is to immediately just jump into starting a church. Don't do that. You need a time to heal. You need a time to simmer. You need a time to just dwell with the Lord, to develop, embrace, and execute on a positive vision for the future rather than a knee-jerk gut reaction to the past. It's a very, very bad way, a fleshly way to grow the church. And so Jesus really summed this up very nicely in the parable of the sower. He said there are some seeds that fall on good soil, but there are a number of seeds that fall on rocky soil, shallow soil, weedsy soil, and you see quick growth. Very quick growth. But when the sun comes up and it gets hot and they get scorched, they scatter. When trial and difficulty comes, they scatter. We see this in the early church. There was persecution that came against the early church, and many people scattered. Many people denied their faith. It's like, well, you had a big crowd, you had a lot of numbers, but when hard times came, it dwindled down to the real core of people. So the challenge is, how do you then spiritually develop the larger number of people to be strong spiritually, deep, rich soil, spiritual formation, discipleship, disciples making disciples amongst your people, rather than just trying to get numbers, rather than just try to pat an ego, rather than just say, wow, we're glad that other church messed up. Wow, look at this amazing growth that we're experiencing. It's a period of revival. Well, it really may not be a period of revival. It may be a period of embracing and faithfulness. So keep your focus. Have a proactive vision. Don't base the direction or the growth of the church on a single personality, but on the Spirit. In fact, it's Paul who says in 1 Corinthians that we sow in water, but only God can make it grow. We can't even make it grow. We fool ourselves if we say, well, if we just had these business leadership perspectives and systems and strategies, then it would grow. Well, you know what? You might get some numbers that way, but it may not grow in a kingdom sense. Your people may not grow deeper. Your people may not become better disciples. Your people may not grow in faithfulness. Your people may be incredibly shallow, but boy, you got a lot more of them now than you used to. You just wait till trouble comes. You just wait till persecution comes, and you see who's left, and you may be shocked at the number of people who are left because you base the kingdom on a personality or upon waiting on the other guy to mess up, or upon business strategy, or upon seeker-friendly, or upon shallow theology, or whatever it may be. You got to base what you're doing on spiritual convictions that come from the biblical foundation, and build upon that, sow in water, and let God make it grow. God bless you. Thanks for watching it. Check out this video on narcissist pastors so that you can spot them when they're around. Sometimes they're incredibly good at hiding. their tendencies. So this will help you spot them. God bless. And if you haven't subscribed, I'd love for you to do that. But if nothing else, hit like on this video if it's blessed you, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.